Welcome. What's up? It's me, Daniel. Welcome back to Asians Read, the stream for tabletop gaming enthusiasts who want to learn more about Asian cultures and make their games more inclusive. We skipped last week because of the American election. And we don't need to talk about this because people didn't come to this stream to hear about the election. And I don't say that because I care about our numbers or anything like that. I say that because I respect everyone who's here. I also want to give a huge shout out to our Discord community because we actually went and made a separate, election chat space that people respected. Chat about the election only happened there. And, I really appreciated how everyone was able to do that. Because there are people who aren't like me and are like doom scrolling for the past week. Okay. You know what? I'm going to get to the news. Two things. One of them involves you folks who are watching. I'll start with, Steve, since you were the one who put me on blast for withholding good news. What do you want to hear first? Do you want the one that involves the audience, or do you want the one that doesn't?
I'm selfish. Tell me the one that doesn't involve the audience. Daniel, okay. this is you and me.
You and I. Okay. As of today, Asians Represent has signed a non-exclusive partnership agreement with Heart of the Deer Unicorn Productions. It means that we are doing merch. So I've been talking about this post-stream in our private Zoom chats for a while, but we've been working on a merchandise deal with Heart of the Deer Unicorn Productions. They got in touch with us and were like, we want to do something Asians represent. Whatever you want. And I said, dope. So we're going to do a limited run of prints and shirts with them. And this coincides really well with another thing that, Steve, you helped facilitate, is that Asians Represent is actually doing a huge rebrand. Steve's friend, Samira Khan, who's super talented, not just like VFX and graphic design, but also cosplay. I don't know her Instagram again, Steve, if you could share that.
I got it. It's Sasmira, but I'll link it.
Yeah. Did a rebrand for us. So you'll see some changes in the near future. It's also why I've been holding off on putting out the newest episode of the podcast, which is on the Chinese fiction genre of wuxia. And that podcast episode blew my fucking mind, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. But I've been saving it for when we put the rebrand out, and that'll happen, I believe, by next week. So yeah, that's our first good piece of news. We've got a merchandise deal. So hopefully we'll be able to do pre-orders by the holidays, but we need an idea. Now,
I just want to say that I can't wait until the day comes when I'm walking around in New York and hopefully the world is back to normal and I'm wearing an Asian Represent shirt and I see someone across the street also wearing an Asian Represent shirt. I'm like, we have a moment. Yeah.
Well,
it'll happen eventually. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I want everyone on the shirt.
Yes.
Right? Because I want the shirt to have everyone who appears like on Asians Represent. So like I want all of you on the shirt in however you want to appear. Like Emma, if you want to be a squirrel on the shirt, we could have Emma as a squirrel. Or like if Sarah, you want to be in your L5R character. Monty, if you want to wear like a Twitch shirt. No, we can't do that. We'll get sued. Like Steve, if you want to be flexing or in cargo shorts, that's already happening. So yeah. And like Jeremy, however you want. Like I want a shirt or a print where we have all of those involved represented in it in some way. So ideas. I need ideas. The second piece of news is that if you've been following along L5R, you'll notice that we're almost done the book. And we're actually on the last section of the book that we're going to be talking about, and that's the GM section. This is the first time I've actually read ahead. Oh, Mahar said Jeremy as Asian Clark Kent.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, that's kind of the reason why I went
to
journalism back when I was like trying to figure out what to do with my life. I was like, I could be like Superman. Yeah. I made an Instagram post being like, I'm gonna be like Superman. It's pretty lame.
Awesome. But yeah, I want I want to do that. Second piece of news is that once L5R ends, this 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern slot is going to turn into something else. And that something else is going to be like a sort of like a late night show. I want to do this late night show because, as we were talking about earlier, it's a great way to differentiate what we do on the stream and YouTube from what we do on the podcast. And not that I want them to be entirely separate, it's that I think they serve different purposes. I think the podcast serves as a way for us to deep dive into very specific topics. I think the stream is a way for us to kind of react to things, be it, the discourse in the industry, or be it like a new product or something like that. And I think the viewers want something different. They want us to talk about lots of games, but all of our time is filled up, reading specific books. And while that's okay, I want us to be able to, introduce more perspectives into Asians Represent. So this is why I need you, the audience. This is why I need your help. So if you're watching on YouTube, you're out of luck, but you could always, send us a tweet at AZNS Represent, or if you're on the Discord, put it in the suggestions section of the Discord. We need to call this new show something. I'm super bad at names. Very, very bad at names. Like, Steve, you were there when we were trying to do Dungeons and Asians, and it was like, what the fuck are we going to call this? And we settled on Dungeons and Asians because it was the one we hated the least. It's the one we hated the least. And we couldn't think of anything better. But now that we have, you folks, our community, we can ask you. So please don't judge me. I'm going to put a poll up on our Twitch stream right now. And these are the first 5. One of them I really like, and Mahar sent me this one. And Mahar had gotten this from Rachel, who is one of our mods. So one of them I really like. One of them I really hate.
Do you have an option that's just keep trying?
I'll do one that's keep trying. I'll get rid of the one that Peter put in here, and I'll put keep trying. Okay, here we go. So I put out a poll, and I think the poll should be good. Let me know.
It's up.
Okay, let me know. And everyone, all of you, I'll give you time to vote as well, if you want to. This vote is going to go on for 10 minutes. I came up with 2 of them, and they were not good ones. So yeah, that's it. That's it for news. We got merch. We have a new brand coming out, and we have a new show in the future. And of course, I would like to extend the invitation to you 5 to join in that show. I think Agatha is going to co-host it with me.
Well, it looks like the new show is going to be called Keep Trying.
God damn it!
Sorry, that's my fault.
It really looks like the show is going to be called Keep Trying. I told you it should have just been called Who Are These Asians and What Are They Talking About? Now it's going to be called Keep Trying.
If I call it Keep Trying, though, it implies... God. It implies that we're going to look at things that are bad, and at the end we're going to be like, hey, you author, keep trying.
It personally reminds me a little bit of my mom trying to teach me math. Keep trying, get the right answer.
Yeah,
Yeah, that wasn't a suggestion for her name. That was just I don't like any of the options.
Yeah. So Asians Talk is overtaking Keep Trying.
At the time when we were coming out, I was like, can we make Aya like
Aya? I said that. That was my suggestion. I said, let's do Aya, and Agatha's like, too Chinese.
It is very Chinese, in that half my family, I'm Vietnamese, half my family says it, and the other half just fucking hate it. So
should it have like something in the title that indicates kind of what we tend to talk about?
Well, I like the idea. Games? So like, I like the idea. Well, it doesn't have to be tabletop games, because this gives us the option to talk about like movies, the latest Asian role that Scarlett Johansson snatched up, or whatever. Nice. We could even have Scarlett Johansson on, the most prolific Asian actress of all time.
Nice. Yeah.
But the one I really like is the wrap up. It's the one that has the least votes, except for it's Friday.
I voted for that one.
Yay.
I like the wrap up because to me, I think of dumplings, shawarma, all the different wrapped foods.
Mhm.
Oh, see, if you had given me that imagery, then I probably would have voted for it. But I just thought of it as like some kind of like, okay, we're wrapping up the week, everyone.
Yeah, that too. It's like you get both.
But I'm thinking of like a logo with like a dumpling, and it's like exploding with like nerdy stuff.
Yeah, that's
Like
the
a
idea.
D20 and
Like you
I
could,
don't know.
like you didn't know how to fold your dumpling properly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like I didn't know how to pull my dumpling properly. It's got like a D20 coming out, and like
It's like you
an
boil
RPG
dumplings
book
and you
and,
pull
like,
it out and it's just the dumpling skin
a
and you're like,
small
oh.
SAR telling you L5R lore explodes from the dumpling.
Okay,
I
so,
love this.
so it's Friday has a shit ton of votes now. I realized that I turned on multiple voting because I was like, oh, I'll let people vote. And people are just like, vote, 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 vote. So now we have this giant fight between Keep Trying and It's Friday.
You can just combine the two. It's
Keep trying,
Friday,
it's
keep
Friday.
trying.
It's Friday, keep trying. Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Let's get that poll going, I guess. Oh Lord. Oh.
You asked.
All you in chat are having fucking a field day with this. I love this.
Field day. I'm just looking at this. Oh my God.
I love you all.
Well, I'm apparently gonna let chat decide more. Maybe not let chat decide more things.
My vote goes for streaming stream face.
I think that's
Okay.
the election again, all over again. Keep trying, and it's Friday.
Can you imagine though if it was just like, hey everyone, it's Friday. You know what? I kind of like that. And it's
Like, hey everyone,
I
keep trying.
it's and I will
Until next time, keep trying.
and I will say that It's Friday was my idea. So validated.
Oh, no, we've got voter fraud going on. People are buying votes.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks,
Sorry.
Jeremy.
Oh my god.
On point, current event, black humor joke.
Yeah, go. I don't know. File a lawsuit in Rokugan or something.
How does one file a lawsuit in Rokugan? Sorry, is
I
that
don't know,
such a
Sar.
thing?
Can you do that?
You can't. Oh, okay. Oh Lord, it's absolute BS. It's absolute BS because it's like the high. You literally, one person brings a charge against another person, and literally it's who has the higher status, and that's who wins.
Lame.
But,
No, I shouldn't say
we
that.
can't. We can't say that.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that.
Yeah, sorry.
Not ideal.
Not ideal.
No.
Wait,
No.
in world status, or you mean like your status score?
In world status, like so a
So like
daimyo,
a narrative status.
Mm.
like if you were like a bushi, a shugenja, a courtier, and a peasant brings charge against you, you'd win because who'd believe the peasant?
Yep.
Right. Also,
If you're a geisha, you win 0. You win no of your lawsuits. You have no rights.
is there? But there are people who are lower than the geisha in Rokugan, aren't there?
Geisha are on the same level status-wise from the score
Yeah.
as the non-people.
Yeah, the non-people. Okay,
They're the
that's
same.
They're the same.
The same.
I'm not an expert in L5R. However, I'm looking at the votes right now, and It's Friday is taking a commanding lead. I might just keep trying is just going to be a segment. Maybe keep trying.
That's
is a
so
segment.
salty.
I don't know.
Like there's like the Conan RPG, and like we'd be like keep trying, and it's
Oh.
like
Okay, well, that's another thing I wanted to talk about. I mean, and we have no place to talk about it. It's what's going on with that Conan the Barbarian RPG. Like we're gonna let's talk about Haunted West and how Asians Represent is totally gonna do a Haunted West stream. Yeah, Steve, this by Baby Yoda, it's right here. How we're gonna do a Haunted West stream? How Modifius received huge, like unbelievable amounts of hate for using a cultural consultant, because people were like, I want my Conan, I want my Robert E. Howard world to be just as racist as it was back then. That's what I'm paying for. Like, my God. But yeah, we need a show for that. Maybe Keep Trying is too salty, but It's Friday might be our new stream.
It's less salty, but we keep trying.
We keep trying.
Right.
And
Everybody.
if you folks have any good suggestions, throw them in the chat. Our mod Drew Ryzelk is there. So if we can't do it salty but sweet because there's salty sweet games. So yeah, if you have any ideas, let us know. Andrea says, "Why Gary?"
Ooh.
I feel like that would limit us to just D&D stuff, though. And I do want to talk about good things, like Path of Waves. But anyways, let's get into. It's a Kingdom Hearts reference. I've never played Kingdom Hearts.
I thought about playing all the Kingdom Hearts games at one point, but then there's too freaking many, and they all have names like Kingdom Hearts 75 over 2 3/4 recoded.
Yeah, what the hell's
times
that?
11?
Seriously.
And then like a tilde, but it's pronounced like happiness. Like
I love
it's
that
just,
shit.
I know. Part of me loves that too. Like when there's like a fighting game and it's like Street Fighter and there's an arrow going up and it's pronounced Street Fighter Upper. Like part of me loves that.
I thought you were gonna say Street Fighter, and then there's just a whole bunch of arrows for the combo.
Yeah. But I think there is a Street Fighter game where there's like an arrow in the title. It's called Upper. But yeah, that's why I won't play Kingdom Hearts. Too many, too much lore, too much crazy.
I don't know. But anyways, let's actually get into this. I've read ahead and I've highlighted a couple of things that I think are really good. A couple of things that need discussion. But let's start with the art on the chapter page, the Game Master page 281.
Daniel, did you have any plans to talk about kind of like the reasoning behind skipping skills and techniques? Because we're skipping actually 3 chapters here.
Oh yeah, it's true. I mean, we could all talk about this because we talked about this on our chat. We're skipping those because there's either going to be a lot of overlap with something we've discussed already, or the like weapons and stuff. Yep. Nothing's going to be as bad as chopsticks included in the weapons section of Oriental Adventures. Knock on wood. Or there are things that, it might get too monotonous, or like techniques. I think Steve, you even just highlighted a handful of things.
Yeah. I think in my read, I only highlighted 3 techniques that are worth talking about. And one of them is because I just found it funny. And I was like, I want to talk about this because it's funny.
Yeah. And I don't think that's, while we certainly got a lot of laughs out of this stream, I don't think it's something that those sections are worth talking about in an educational capacity, because we've just covered that so many times. So that's why we're kind of on the GM chapter. Also because one of the things that we've talked about so often is the role of the GM and what the book can do to encourage players to interact with the concepts in this game in less problematic ways. We've talked about, adversarial GMs or encouraging adversarial GM and player relationships. So it'll be interesting to see the GM chapter for what it actually is, and if it, like many other things in this book, actually clashes with, everything else in L5R. So that's why. Thank you for bringing that up, Steve. It's Friday, got 375 votes.
And with the 33 people watching, we got 375 votes.
Well, I think what was it? N99.
We must respect the electoral process.
So N99G
N99G
contributed 3,560 bits, and Drew Ryzel contributed 11,800 channel points to do all these votes. So these votes were all legal, so we're good.
Yeah.
It's Friday. It's definitely going to be involved in this new series. Whether it would actually be the title of the series, It's Friday, or it'll be a section. I'll let y'all know. I put It's Friday into the chat that I have with Jade, Agatha, and Amar, and nobody responded. And it has been over 12 hours since I put that into the chat.
It's not a good sign.
It's not a good sign. But anyways, let's talk about this art. I first want to ask you, Sar, who is this?
This is Shinjo Takuya, one of the characters from the beginner box. I just linked the official art, also done by Amelie Hutt.
It's a familiar name. We've heard that name before, right?
Yeah, has done like most of the art we've looked at.
Most of the chapter heading art is by her. She also did like the big personalities, for L5R, Moto Chagatai, Mitsu, a bunch of big name characters that was part of the clan. The clan packs, the cover art for the clan packs was done by her.
We've consistently liked her art usually when Sar drops it in the chat. And I quite like this character, the way he looks, actually.
Yeah.
I do too.
If he had been included in the standard beginner box, because he was like an add-on DLC thing that you had to download, but I probably would have chosen to play as him.
Yeah, I mean, if I was looking at all the art, this one I would, and I have the beginner box, I would have picked this one as well. He's a cool looking character, looks happy.
I feel like I feel like he looks like the main character in like a Breath of the Wild type game. And I would love to play a Breath of the Wild type game with this guy, with his bow and with his, funky hair and little skin cloak, jumping off of mountains and doing as the unicorn do. I don't know. I just find it to be a very evocative character design.
Yeah. And yeah, you could tell this is a Unicorn Clan member, different kind of weapons. The bow is different, got all of the furs. I think it's really cool. And it doesn't scream like I'm the Unicorn Clan. There you don't see like unicorns everywhere on it. We now know it's the Unicorn Clan because we could see the different style of weapon and bow. And we know from the lore that the Unicorn Clan aren't of, they haven't been in Rokugan for a while, and they left for like over almost 1,000 years and then came back. So I think that's really neat. I like this art a lot. I think it's definitely one of my favorite pieces in the book. The other one is the samurai with the red helmet at the very beginning of the book.
Also done by Amelie Hutt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic art. But anyways, so I think everyone who is either watching this on YouTube or watching it live right now on Twitch, we know what the GM is, the game master. They bring the world to life for the rest of the players. In Dungeons and Asians, in Asians represented in general, we like to call this person, who might be called the MC. In Delta Green, they're called the handler. We like to call this person the dramatic manager. I love that one. The dramatic manager, I think, has a, less of an adversarial approach to it. It doesn't sound like you are, overseeing all of the players. Also, it just sounds super dope. I'm the dramatic manager. But let's move through this, and we're going to touch on things we like, things we don't like. And please stop me if I skip over something that you wanted to mention, or just bring it up right away. On the first page, on page 282, the role of the GM, I've highlighted something on the page that I really like. And it's under the Who's in Charge Here section. And it says, so who's in charge here? Last sentence of the second paragraph leading into the first bit of the third paragraph. It says, remember, everyone, including the GM, is there to have fun. If someone isn't comfortable with something going on in the story, that's another matter entirely. Players should tell the GM if something in the story is making them uncomfortable and vice versa. It is a good idea to establish a set of signals beforehand to clearly indicate when such concerns arise. So, while they could have been way more explicit, that's totally okay. Things happen. But I love seeing a tabletop RPG where they actually put, hey, everyone has to feel comfortable here, especially when you're dealing with material that really can get touchy. We saw this happen with, talk about it right now, Haunted West, when Chris Spivey got this huge cast to do Haunted West actual play on the Darker Hue Twitch channel, and he had announced that Matt Mercer was cast. A couple days ago, he put out a tweet announcing the whole cast, and it was Matt Mercer as this Asian dude. And there were a whole bunch of red flags here. Matt Mercer playing an Asian dude, the Asian dude using a white name because of found family, and the Asian dude being the academic. And while a lot of this is like historically accurate, right? Or historically subversive, like an Asian academic at the time of the Wild West is unheard of, right? When combined with like our modern politics, we saw, a huge backlash, right? And people weren't comfortable with this. And one of those people was Matt Mercer, who didn't know that he was going to be playing an Asian character until that tweet went out, and he backed out, right? So it's super important that you have these conversations with your player, and that's something that Chris didn't do. I guess he assumed that everyone would be okay with these characters. And we all make assumptions. We all get comfortable. He just happened to do this at a very public space in a way that could cause a lot of harm. So I love this, this series of sentences because it tells you, contrary to everything that we've been talking about in L5R, it tells you that everyone at the table has a say and everyone needs to feel welcome at the table. Previously, we've talked about how the GM can manipulate certain systems within this game to cause harm. But here we see them saying explicitly that everyone needs to feel comfortable here. And if you feel uncomfortable, you need to have expectations at your table on how to address this. And they said, a set of signals beforehand. Some people use the X card, some people use the O card, some people literally just feel comfortable enough to be like, hey, I don't want to do that. So I really like this, and that's why I highlighted it. Steve, you look like you're going to say something.
I also like this section, but
yeah.
I liked it less when I clicked on the link that is provided in the book, or I went to the website. I went to fantasyflight.com because they said explicitly a list of reading materials can be found here, and then went to fantasyflight.com. But I went to the website and I searched for a while, and I could not find any of these resources.
I did not.
So that was disappointing for me to see, but not unexpected. My flow here was to look for L5R explicitly. It wasn't in the extra documentation. I then went to the community and went to the forums and whatnot. Still couldn't find it. Didn't go through every single forum, but
that kind of sucks.
So I'm sure at some point in time there was material available, probably at the time of publication. But at the current time, 2020, November the 13th, Friday the 13th, it's not available explicitly on the website, though I'm sure maybe it's stored somewhere. But that was disappointing to see.
I mean, like a company as big as FFG could just make a vanity link and just be like, hey, fantasyflightgames.com/safety.
Absolutely.
I would expect that if there was a dedicated space, that it wouldn't just be go to our website.
Yeah, go here.
Go to a specific part of our website.
At best, I think they had good intentions. At worst, I think this was a little bit theatrical on their part. I cannot know one way or the other. But the fact that I couldn't find these resources makes me feel actually quite sour about the overall section here.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer. I didn't even click on it. That kind of sucks.
I feel like this should be the standard for any GM section. So I like it, but I kind of don't want to give them too much credit. I realize it's not in a lot of GM sections in books, which is a shame, but in a lot of newer published role-playing game books, I've seen just regular references to safety tools in the X card, and they just will straight up use those terms and refer you to where to access them online. Like, I feel like that should be the standard going forward, and I like that they give advice here, and obviously they just link to the Fantasy Flight Games website, which is not good, but I feel like this is almost like the bare minimum of what should be expected in a GM section.
Yeah, I mean, in the indie scene, in any like small indie RPG, you will see this is going to be at the very beginning of the game.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just because I've been reading a lot of newer published role-playing books, a lot of indie books. Maybe I've just gotten used to seeing that. But this was published, I think, in 2018, so not that long ago.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
It's also a bit indicative of how Fantasy Flight has treated L5R in general. Like and look, I love FFG to death, and these are valid criticism of FFG on how they handle a product. We were promised for the card game that if you attained the title of Hatamoto, there would be a special lounge for you. No such lounge existed. They were promised that they would maintain the Hall of Honor. So if you do achieve Hatamoto status, that your picture and your name and your clan would be put on the website. It's still not up yet. Still not updated yet. So it's honestly par for the course.
I've also gotten the impression with FFG that as far as L5R, the RPG is concerned, it's sometimes of a kind of like a second priority, especially with the card game coming first. And then the grand scheme of FFG properties, L5R in general, is not quite up there with like the Star Wars, with the Arkham horrors, with the other things. I mean, was that correct, or is that just an assumption on my part?
I think it's a safe assumption because RPGs are way less.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
They generate far less revenue.
Yeah.
If you go to Gen Con, you can see how many different tables there are dedicated to like the minis game or the card games.
Yeah.
And then because I was a demoer for Fantasy Flight like 3 years ago, I think we get like 4, maybe 6 tables for RPGs in general. Like this includes Star Wars and some, 1 or 2 tables for Legend of Five Rings and stuff.
Yeah, I just that's a shame, but I totally get it. This isn't. The RPG, I'm sure, is definitely not their most profitable property.
Well, the folks in the chat are mentioning now Edge, a different company.
Oh, yeah, that's
Edge,
right.
Yes.
Technically owns the rights to the role-playing game. So maybe we'll see
maybe that's
more
why
content and different content and more care taken with
maybe that's why
that
the sort of the safety sheet isn't on their website anymore.
Everything else is on on Fantasy Flight's website, though.
Oh, never mind then.
Yeah. Edge is this year when they actually announced.
Yeah.
There's a list of links and resources, and it's not organized very well, but they're all available. So if you want to see the errata, you can click on that. I see no reason why you couldn't click on the safety tools for L5R.
Sorry, I have a question then about, since you are prior to 2020 being 2020, you were heavily involved in like the competitive play scene for the CCG, and like Monty, you have like some experience with this, and I don't know if you have experience with like their organized RPG play as well.
There's the only organized RPG play that I know of happens at cons.
Okay,
so conventions.
Do they talk about safety at the? Do they have protocols in place for this at cons?
I will be honest and say I don't know, because when this is happening, I'm usually trying to run running the tournament. So I wish I could, because I really wanted to play Wedding at Kyoto Castle, but unfortunately, judge calls needed to be answered.
Yeah.
So I feel like I can add something here, because if you do go to the FFG website, there's a list. There's a link for open events for L5R, and there's a list of people who are banned, and when they're banned will be lifted from open events.
That I will be okay. Those are something that I will actually speak to, because I actually do know about that. I am actually very proud to say this. Not one person on that list was banned for playing L5R.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's just a general ban. I'll tell you what I think is the best organized play space I've ever seen at a con. Big Bad Con.
Yeah.
Hands down, the best organized play space I have ever seen for board games, card games, RPGs. So not only do they have widely distributable reference material on safety tools, what to use, but In their space, they had cloth walls between tables to limit noise. And they had a table full of resources that you could use. They had foam dice if you didn't want the noise of dice rolling on tables. They had like tools that you could use to grab dice. They had it's an incredible thing. They had special things that you could use to hold cards if you don't want to hold cards or you're unable to hold cards with your hands. Like that con is gold standard for me when it comes to inclusivity and safety. But that being said, I don't want to take away from what we see here. This is a good step. But it's on page 282.
Yeah.
And I understand that the GM chapter generally comes at the end. I get that. Just kind of a bummer because this is really good. So is there anything else on this page that you folks wanted to talk about?
I will admit that I did not read ahead, so
That's okay.
I don't have a schedule of things.
I mean, this is generally about like, setting up your game, finding a group. And they do a lot of things here in this chapter. Like, hey, if somebody doesn't vibe with the group or they're disregarding other people's opinions or being disrespectful, kick them out of the group. They actually say that in this chapter, which I thought is really neat because I don't think the Dungeon Master's Guide for D&D says that.
The Dungeon Master's Guide for 5th edition is a very weird book.
Because it's
more of a world building. Here's how to build your world type thing. There is no advice in there for running games, and I find it's incredible because you think how many people have gotten into role playing games because of 5th edition, and the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is supposed to be how to run a game, it's supposed to have stuff in there like what to do with problem players, blah blah blah. Has none of that. It's incredible.
Yeah, I use the DMG more as a player than as a GM because it's got like
it's a toolkit. It's a toolkit. It's like a DM or D&D hacks more like. It doesn't have any of this general advice, and I personally feel that like a huge variety of the threads you see on Reddit from new D&D players and RPG players in general and DMs being like, how do I deal with the situation at the table?
That book doesn't tell you how to do it.
It's because that book does not tell you.
No.
And, yeah.
But,
rant over. I've just the DM's guide is something else.
One of my favorite GM chapters in any book is actually the GM chapter or the MC, the Master of Ceremonies chapter in Urban Shadows. That chapter is fantastic because it tells you about how to, it talks about safety. It tells you how to create tension. It tells you how to respect people. I think it's really cool. But anyways, let's move on then. On the next page, I have two things highlighted. Under running a scene, I have something that's really not like an Asian thing, but something that I wish more people did when they were running games. Mm-hmm. The second paragraph, it says, besides the basics like who, what, when, where, and why, 3 key ingredients are needed to create conflict in a scene: a goal or a desire, one or more obstacles to the goal, and stakes for success or failure. I think that's great to communicate to the player. For me, I like triple T. I like timer, threat, and treat. That's what I like to use. But I like seeing this in a game because it's actually instructing people how to play it, right? Again, I think this fits perfectly at the back of the book, but I think the safety thing that they talk about should be at the front. Safety is not just for the GM. That's for
in this
everyone.
section. I do like their advice on pacing because
Yeah.
I played in a lot of games that have poor pacing, and it's because perhaps the GM has not really managed to nail down what they put in bold here: goal or desire, obstacles, stakes. And then in the very next paragraph, they talk about this is what pacing is all about: slowing down and zooming in on the action, that is to say on the conflicts, and speeding up or summarizing moments in game world time where there isn't anything dramatic happening. And I played in some games that quite struggle with that. So I quite like this advice here. And I like the following paragraph where it says, an exception to that are slice of life or characterization scenes. I like how they encourage you to incorporate slice of life, seemingly mundane but important because they draw out the personalities of the players. I just think that's good advice, particularly because this game is going to a lot of people playing it are probably going to be influenced by their favorite anime, and some of the slice of life episodes in your favorite anime series are the best ones, like Goku and Piccolo learning how to drive. Oh, that was technically a filler episode, but it's still a good one.
They're good.
Yeah.
I also like the red sidebars. They have how often to play. You don't see that very often in a book, right? Because we all know that scheduling is a really tough part of playing an RPG. It's perhaps the bane of most groups, just getting together to try to play. Then we have, of course, learning the ropes. A really cool thing here about introducing new players. For a player brand new to the game system, it can be useful to let them play a character starting out of the gate to get the feel of the rules and then catch them up in terms of experience points after a session or two. In such cases, the GM should adjust the target numbers for their checks to help them succeed with the same frequency as the rest of the group. I think that's really neat. I think it's neat that they encourage the GM to kind of scale the play experience for different people. Like, how many of us were, when we were playing in person, roll up behind a GM screen and just say numbers that aren't actually what rolls on your dice? Do that all the time. Because you want to create that tension, those obstacles and those stakes that they talk about. Then I have being respectful of each other. I think this is important. I don't know if anybody wants to read this, or I can.
Daniel, I would love if you read this.
Okay, Steve. You want? Okay, I got this. Look, I always ask, and I know you always ask, and I'll lower an octave, and maybe we'll do like a nice ASMR read. No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna do that. Because people have
you could
said,
do that if you want to.
I mean, on it. Hey everyone, welcome to It's Friday. Or I should say,
keep trying.
Everyone.
Keep trying.
Oh. Okay. So, being respectful of each other, Rokugan is a world with as many complexities as our own, so mature topics and themes may arise during play. Its society comes with inherent injustices, including the caste system, Rokugan's repressive code of Bushido, the use of torture, and xenophobia. It's up to the group to determine what social issues and levels of violence or sexuality they're comfortable featuring as part of the story. Groups should change whatever makes them uncomfortable, whether that means modifying the setting or avoiding some topics. Once these expectations have been discussed, it's everybody's responsibility to ensure that these expectations are upheld and everyone in the group feels comfortable and welcome. All right. What I really like about this is that they address that, some of these things might not line up with what people want at their table, and how they say this is a group decision and the group should hold everyone accountable to these. One of the things that I've noticed in a lot of GM chapters is that the GM chapter tends to put all of the emotional labor of keeping everyone safe on a single person. That is the GM. When everyone else at the table should be responsible for that as well, right? So that's why I like this. I like that it said it's about the group. I like that they talk about how Rokugan isn't perfect, and there are a lot of there's some mature subject matter here that, you don't have to address. And it kind of stands in a stark contrast to how there are a lot of people who will say yeah, but the lore says this. Well, now I can say what the GM chapter says, it's okay to cut it out.
But what do you think of that being in the GM chapter and not a more general chapter on the group would? Because I will never GM an L5R game. But if
never
I'm going
never, Emma. I think you'd be a great GM.
No,
yeah,
never.
I would be down for your anthropomorphic L5R game where we're all actual crabs defending a wall somewhere.
Okay. I can write something, but I don't know.
I think someone clip it so we have it.
Oh,
when Emma
God,
goes,
evidence.
no, never.
Honestly,
Emma, I think you could totally I feel like you could run or at least facilitate something that's not at least GM heavy, microscope or beak, feather, and bone, I think would be something that you could at least facilitate for people.
Right. I appreciate that. But like, besides my capabilities, if I never planned on GMing the game, would I ever read the GM chapter?
No. Many games tell you not to read it. Some of this stuff
that's on the group, like this right here, is about the group. That needs to be somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I honestly think that they should have a little section at the beginning, and it's just called Table Expectations. Or, they should just have a section called Playing the Game, or Before You Start Reading. And they could put a couple of just like, it could be one page, or just a couple of little paragraphs, like being respectful to each other and things like that. So I completely agree, Emma. There's this belief that this kind of information or enforcing rules or enforcing behavior is something that the GM has to do. And yes, the GM should do that, but the player should also do that.
Yeah. But then this also, I don't know, I don't want to keep creating like this nefarious GM character who's out to be a jerk, but this also puts the power in the GM's hands to be like, this is my table, my rules. And there's no general statement to everyone to be like, hey, we don't have to be jerks. You don't have to be uncomfortable.
I think some of that.
Oh, go ahead, Jeremy.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think some of that dynamic is created by the fact that, some of this stems from the lineage of role-playing games, I think, and the fact that like the game master, the dungeon master, the dramatic manager, the keeper, whatever you want to call it, it has traditionally been painted as like this director in control of the narrative, the person behind the screen, and their section is often like in the back of the book or an entirely different book that, as Daniel said, sometimes they're like, don't read this because there are secrets in here for how to like read monster stat blocks and blah, blah, blah. And some GMs will get taken with that and really run with it. They won't want to reveal the secrets of the toolbox. But I think a lot of modern RPGs are starting to do this. And what I think all RPGs should do is, there's a section, how to be a GM, but also like how to be a player. And that section is also like what things you might want to do to just, be a kind, engaging player at the table, how you can work in relation to your GM. It doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship where like the GM is trying to kill you guys. It should be a cooperative relationship where the GM is trying to bring out the best in your character, and you're aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly comes from the old RPG lineages, and AD&D and all of that. Like, I've had friends who have like gleefully taken on that mantle of, I'm going to try to kill the party every single session.
Which is okay if the party knows that that's going to happen and is all right with that.
Well, like I had a friend who that was his reputation. He had a reputation for being that GM, and people would be like, I don't want to have to play with him because that's what he does. But we also see that in, high profile games. You see it on Critical Role all the time when Matt Mercer does something and he says, are you sure you want to do that? Like, and I've said this before, like the act of saying, are you sure you want to do that? Tells the players that reinforces the fact that the GM has power over the players that they will not be able to overcome. So yeah, I don't know. The adversarial GM could be the topic of a whole podcast, honestly.
Yeah. Do you think, sorry, just a side note, do you think you could do a Hades style thing where the point is to die, but it moves the narrative along?
I'm so upset about Hades.
Interesting. I think you could. I think you could.
Wheel of Judgment.
Yeah, Wheel of Judgment. I mean, I think that could be a lot of fun.
I'm so upset about Hades.
From a game design perspective, what you need to make sure is that when you do a game like that, it is all about system mastery. So a game like Hades is built so that the system is very consistent with itself, so that it's very predictable. Even though there are a lot of variables, you can predict certain things as time goes on. And that is the joy of those types of games, especially roguelikes. So in a tabletop RPG, unfortunately, with the GM, you have this like unknown aspect. And to master the system, by definition, means mastering the GM, which is not probably something you want to try to achieve with your friends.
I mean, I think it depends. I think you could definitely do a Hades type thing from a story perspective.
Yes.
But I mean, the games that I tend to run tend to be more story focused than mechanics focused, even when I'm running like a mechanics heavy system. So I see a lot of possibilities for doing like a Hades type story, particularly if I don't know, you're playing ultra powerful characters or characters that are immortal or something like that. And if there are like, if there's the concept of like, you know, Hades or like the underworld in your game, like I see that as a very interesting framework to play with. But yeah, Steve is absolutely right that mechanically roguelikes are kind of about mastering the game, and yeah, you mastering the GM, that's a whole other set of worms.
I think it's also interesting because like every GM, including me, has like certain strengths and weaknesses that like will also make the game each game feel very different. So like Sarah running L5R would probably be very different than me running L5R. Would be different from Emma running L5R, and having, you know, copy edited several GM chapters from different games and sitting there going, okay, the chapter has to be generic because, you know, you're trying to address everybody, but then that's also not enough because, like, you know, I can't tell if the writer of the book can't tell if that I, for example, am really bad at keeping track of NPCs. And so, you know, I'll create 5 people named Bob and forget that they all have completely different backstories or stuff like that, you know. And so I mean, I don't have trouble with Bob. Never mind. I'm just exaggerating for effect here. But like as a copy editor, my attention is trying to figure out like how to make the GM advice not too generic, but then like also specific enough so that person can then look for more resources. And that's the hardest. That's really hard.
So the only thing, and this is why I've been quiet. So the only thing that I know that has roguelike elements to it in a TTRPG is a game called A Rasp of Sand. And I had to find it, but I'll share it in the chat. So A Rasp of Sand is like a TTRPG that uses Knave, which we've talked about before, as its like foundation. And it's actually a roguelike where the players actually inherit traits of their heirs when they die.
It's like Rogue Legacy.
Yeah, it's like Rogue Legacy, but it's a TTRPG. So Rasp of Sand is $10. Get it at itch.io. Art is cool. Super cute. It kind of reminds me of Wind Waker.
That's cool, and it reminds me of like a Twitter post I once saw about some kid who was playing D&D for the first time, and his character died. Then he looked at his character sheet, crossed out his character's name, and then wrote Junior under it, and was like, "I will avenge my father."
Yeah, yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, check out A Rasp of Sand. It's not. I don't think the creator is Asian, but it's still a worthwhile tool to take a look at if it can make your game more interesting. So yeah, there's A Rasp of Sand. I think we should move on. I highlighted like dealing with disruptions. I really liked how, you know, they literally tell people that maybe you should step aside and not be in this group. Do it privately. Don't shame them. They've put a lot of effort into writing a section on table etiquette, like on being late or being absent. Which is cool. There's the whole your game, your Rokugan area that I highlighted as well. You know, just changing tone when you want it to match the needs of your player. And then they had a whole thing on metagaming. But I think the thing that we should probably spend the most time on, and Steve, you were the one who highlighted it, and you did this on Twitter too, which I thought was really awesome, was evoking the Legend of the Five Rings setting. Do you want to start with this, Steve, since you put out that Twitter post?
Yeah, I'll start reading it, and I think it's worthwhile to kind of read it paragraph by paragraph and stopping if we need to. But this is both good, but in the realm of keep trying, which sounds very salty, but actually I think that there's a lot that is here that's very good and stuff I haven't seen before in like a D&D type book. But I think there's more distance to take it to be you can take it further to be more inclusive. So evoking the legend the Five Rings setting. The Legend of the Five Rings RPG is different compared to many other role-playing games, not only for its unique setting elements inspired by real East Asian cultures, but also because of its thematic focus on personal drama, court intrigue, folkloric magic, and mythology. The following considerations can help GMs bring the Emerald Lands of Rokugan to life and showcase the unique elements of the game and setting. So making locations memorable. From bamboo forests to sheer cliffs, the geography of Rokugan is as beautiful as it can be dangerous. Arguably, the landscape inspired an entire religion with a focus on honoring nature, and a typical Rokugani samurai will see wonders in the natural world around them. When describing the character's surroundings, keep in mind all 6 of their senses, what they see, hear, smell, taste, feel, and sense on a spiritual level. And you can tailor your description to a particular character based on their advantages and disadvantages. A samurai with a passion for sake will notice sake carts and houses first, while a samurai with anxiety about dogs will perceive canines to be more vicious and aggressive. Another tip is about texture, and this is kind of where I started my tweet. Compare the mental picture you get and the emotions you feel when you think of a forest in a valley compared with a rocky hillside covered in gnarled black pines, their branches all twisted to a point toward the mountain peaks. One way to come up with a piece of texture is to look in books and online photography depicting East Asian landscapes and art and record interesting details from those pictures. Take the time to research the flora and fauna endemic to the region and learn their names and what they look like. Better yet, experience as much East Asian culture as you can personally. This can be accomplished in ways far less expensive than traveling in those countries, such as by visiting museums, exhibitions, and attending cultural festivals and presentations held at libraries and universities or in cities and towns with East Asian communities. You may be surprised to discover a cherry blossom festival in your area or visiting speakers, musicians, and artists. So that's where I'll pause.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Steve, where would you like to start?
I think I'd like to start with
because there's good and bad there.
So I really like the idea that the game, the text tells you explicitly, like, hey, we built our game on like real cultural signifiers, and we would encourage you to go out and try to experience those things. It almost is like a way to say, like, if you're uncomfortable but you like your game, you should try to push into that. Be more uncomfortable and see more things and experience more things that are outside of like your wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. And that is very powerful. And for me, borders on like a magical, transcendental thing.
I think it's also just learn new perspectives.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do here on this Twitch channel, on our YouTube channel, but also with the podcast. We're not trying to attack you for liking L5R. We're not trying to attack you for writing this or, saying something. We're trying to teach you. We're trying to share our perspective. And look, L5R encourages that. And I think that's a really good positive. Anyways, go ahead.
Did anyone else want to focus on the positives here?
Go ahead. Keep going.
One thing is like it's just part of the L5R community itself that as a lot of people have mentioned, that the reason that L5R was their step into learning about East Asia. Unfortunately, it's kind of like that's where it ended for a lot of people. They learn about East Asia, they learn about history, they learn about the culture, they don't learn about the deeper significance of anything. And that I think that's people need to take that next step, really.
Yeah. There's a tiny bit of talking about it in the sidebar of Your Game, Your Rokugan, where it says some may be drawn to L5R for their love of samurai fiction and cinema, such as Akira Kurosawa films and books by Eiji Yoshikawa and James Clavell. Many L5R fans begin as students of Japanese history or culture, as fans of anime and manga, or both. And then it goes on to say, like, other fans might be like fans of science fiction, and they're looking to kind of bring those science fiction stories in, but doesn't talk any deeper than that. It's just kind of like people exist and they want to play L5R for different reasons. But yeah, the text does not go into detail as to where there are complexities and nuances to use the buzzword for this stream. And that I think is a shame.
I almost wish that there was like a sidebar or a series of sidebars throughout this entire book talking about where did the inspiration for L5R come from in this particular aspect. Like when I read their description about landscapes, I'm reminded of Chinese painting, like Chinese mountain landscapes, like shanshui, where it literally means mountain and water, or mountain and river. And, you know, you have these elaborate paintings that show the majesty of nature. And then you have like a small human, like standing on a mountainside. It shows how tiny man or woman is in relation to the grandiose nature around him. And just telling someone, you know, the name of that style of painting could open up a whole new world of actual avenues for them to explore, plus inspiration for a potential L5R game master. But they just say, oh, go check out paintings in the library, or go, you know, look, you know, read some books, and that's fine. But I guess and it's interesting because, you know, I'm thinking of Call of Cthulhu right now, and which is a weird connection to make, but part of the reason I actually like Call of Cthulhu is because the books just end up teaching you a lot about the 1920s. Like if you're playing in the 1920s setting, and, you know, putting aside the problematic schematics of Lovecraft, it's fascinating to learn about history. The whole Keeper's Guide of Call of Cthulhu is basically a history book on the lore. Is just real world lore. You're learning about what happened in the 1920s, and that gets really fascinating when you're learning about, you know, Harlem Unbound, like
That's
the Harlem
I was about to say.
1920s. That is really fascinating to learn about. And I realize, you know, Rokugan is not Japan, except when it is. And it would be interesting to, I don't know, you know, maybe get a little sidebar here and there about the actual real world things that have permeated this fantasy version of Asia.
Almost like they're saying, like, this person's inspired by this, or like that. Yeah.
And I don't think there's any harm in saying that the setting of Rokugan itself is based on Japan. So look into Japanese specific imagery or artists and paintings, like all of the woodblock prints and everything that's going on sets a mood. So they could be a little more specific.
Yeah, they do say East Asian culture as if it's a monolith. And that's one of the issues that I took with this. I really appreciate how they encourage people to, you know, especially at a time like this, you know, give your patronage to Asian businesses, go learn about Asian culture. But at the same time, when you say Asian, what do you mean? Right? Like Emma, you're 100% right. They could just say, hey, learn about Japanese culture, because that's what this is based on, except for the Dragon Clan.
And like later
and the Unicorn Clan.
And the Unicorn Clan.
list, and later their list of inspirations are primarily Japanese. So just like do it.
Just fucking say it.
Just say it.
Just fucking say it.
This is them being they're this entire GM chapter so far is they play it very safe.
Extremely.
And it's that safety, that business safety is how I'll call it, that causes the harm here, because all of us identify as Asian, and East Asian is like a very there's a lot to unpack in that term. And although you can be identified as it, I don't think anyone just like says like, oh yeah, I'm an East Asian. That just seems like something that people don't say. They say things like, I'm Chinese American, or I'm Chinese Canadian, or I'm Chinese, or I'm Vietnamese, or I'm Japanese. And this section kind of says that doesn't happen. It just says that, oh, you have a Chinatown?
Go to
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Imagine a
now
person just wandering around
East
Chinatown and like being like, I'm trying to learn more about Rokugan.
Rokugan.
Oh, look.
Oh, Rokugan. They definitely got these kinds of
Rokugan
shops.
Yeah.
And it's despite those best intentions that I really criticize this, because it does a disservice to both the fiction, which is clearly inspired by Japan and Japanese culture and history, and does a disservice to all the other East Asian cultures, which it thinks it's trying to represent, but fails miserably to do.
You could really just say this is inspired by Japan and its relationships with other East Asian countries. Like, you could just say that.
Yeah. A lot of the problems that we brought up would actually be solved if they had just included that disclaimer.
If they just said that.
We'd be like, okay, fine.
Cool.
But instead it's like, no, Asian everything. Samurai.
It's like going to Chinatown and being like, what can I learn about samurai, good sir?
But I know
hello,
why they
East
did
Asian person.
If someone ever calls me an East Asian, I'm gonna be upset.
I'm an East Asian Canadian. No.
But because of the text here, even trying to say that causes problems, because what it does is it basically says the Unicorn Clan and the Phoenix Clan, which are now coded to be Korean. If you just say like, oh yeah, this is based in Japan, those people who identify with those clans understand what you're saying, and you're saying that they're the other. You're saying that they're not the people who belong, and that is a problem as well. So you've kind of written yourself into like a corner here, which sucks.
I mean, yeah. But also you could say like, hey, this is based on Japan. If you want to learn more about Japan, do this. I think we also live in a world where the global relationships between countries is very much something that's universally understood for the I guess it's understood for the most part. If you go into this game and you say, hey, this is based on Japan and its relationships with other Asian nations, because there is Southeast Asia, there's some influence there too, right? If you just say that, I don't know if you necessarily create an other, right? Because we also haven't in this sentence said that Rokugan is Japan, right? Yeah. We could say that Rokugan is representative or takes inspiration from Japan and its neighbors. And if you say that it takes inspiration from Japan and its neighbors and the real historical relationships between them, then you might be able to get away with, hey, like this clan is kind of Korean, this clan is kind of West Asian, this clan is like they're Shaolin monks, without creating an other. Mm-hmm. But you have to be specific about what your world actually is.
I actually kind of disagree with that, and the reason is because the reason I say that is because if the game is built to be Japan as the default, then by doing that, you've created a power dynamic between those who are the default and those who aren't, and that's a form of othering here.
My point is you need to first establish that the default is not Japan. That's what I'm saying. If you establish that the default is a fictional Asian culture that is, inspired by Japan and its relationships with other countries, then you don't create an other when those other countries are included in your campaign setting.
I see what you're saying.
If the default is not just Japan.
Yeah.
Right. But that this is a very challenging thing to do from a tabletop design perspective. Mm-hmm. Like right now I'm working on, my Chronicles of Spring and Autumn, and it is very difficult to do. It's actually the hardest tabletop RPG thing that I've ever done, because I am trying to do something very specific, and I'm trying to draw from a very specific period of time that's actually in a very specific geographic location within China. And I'm trying hard to, be faithful to the history, but also not to draw from places where I shouldn't. So there are challenges to doing, to our solution. But is that challenge and that difficulty worthwhile? 100%, because there wouldn't be Asians read that if you took the time. Or instead we'd be talking about this on It's Friday.
It's Friday.
It's Friday.
Oh. Yeah.
I'm gonna write that one down. Maybe
my only other I don't know if we're going to continue, but my only other comment on this is do not rely on museums to teach you things.
Yes, because of the colonial histories of museums.
Yeah. And they don't really give a lot of context, and a lot of the times it's just objects sitting there completely removed from all context.
Yeah.
And some of it's even just presented for people who already know or just want to look at neat things. So don't rely on museums. Like, totally go to them.
I mean, let's talk about
let's
talk about the Japan gallery that used to be at our home museum.
The tiniest gallery of all that had some swords and teapots.
Yeah. So the Japan gallery at the Royal Ontario Museum. I don't work there anymore. I can talk shit.
They never gave me a job, so I could.
Yeah, I only worked there for 15 years, but you know what? I'm going to talk shit now. When you walk into the Japan Gallery, it's situated in the corner of the first floor of the museum. If any of you ever come to Toronto, I'll take you on a tour. The entire Asian section of the museum, get this, it's on one wing of the museum. China is massive, and then like on the edges of the China Gallery are Korea on one end, which is just ceramics, and Japan on the other end. The Japan Gallery is in a tiny little corner, and when you walk in, the first thing you see are suits of armor, and there's no historical context or anything like that. It's just these are different kinds of armor. There's no chronology or anything. There are like some blades, there are some tsuba, there are some early swords, and then there's like this diorama of a tea ceremony.
Yeah.
And then there's some modern art, some paintings, and then some pottery, and like a single Buddha. And that's all that they had there. And then get this, the Ainu display, and we've talked about the Ainu a lot on Asians Represent. The Ainu are on a separate floor of the museum. The Ainu are on the third floor of the museum in a different building.
They're in the ethnography of Asia Pacific.
Yeah, it's the gallery, and get this, the gallery is called, we call it AAAP, but it's Africa, Americas, and Asia Pacific. That's all one gallery. So they got all of Africa, except for Egypt, because Egypt is always separate, because apparently it's not Africa. It's the rest of Africa, right? It's Hokkaido, and then it's Mesoamerica, because they have Mesoamerica there too, and then they have the Polynesian Islands.
Sorry, can I give you space to kind of speak your heart here? Because it feels like you have something building.
All I gotta say is, at least your Asian museum is above ground. The Smithsonian, Freer, and Sackler is underground. It's literally a hallway linking two buildings.
I've been to one cool underground museum. Emma, did you go to Kwahuchao with me? Were we there together?
No, I didn't get to go.
Okay, so this is a positive, right? I'm going to type it into the chat because nobody's going to know how to spell that.
You went there after I left because you got me that sample of the mystery tuber.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Mystery tuber?
That's another story. Let's leave Steve in disbelief.
Oh, yeah.
Emma and I have had some serious adventures.
This is a research thing, believe it or not. I have a folder that's called Mystery Tuber.
I worked hard to get Emma that sample. Now, there is a Chinese site called Kwahuchao, and the entire museum is actually underwater.
Oh.
The museum is actually underneath a lake. The whole
really
thing.
Cool.
And when they discovered the site, there was like a dam project, and the water was actually going to overtake the archaeological site. So they built a concrete dome over an entire ancient settlement. And you have to literally go down like a ramp which goes underneath a lake into this museum. It is the most beautiful museum ever.
It's a really cool site too.
Yeah, it's super cool.
We also went to that one that was the tomb with the horses and chariots buried.
Yes. Well, there's a lot of those.
That was underground too.
Yeah. And then there's
a lot of stuff underground.
There's a lot of underground. So we're not shitting on underground museums. It's just execution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kwahuchao also has the world's oldest canoe. And
that's a fun claim.
So
nice.
I got to sit in a sealed chamber with the world's oldest canoe.
Claim to fame.
And Emma, we've also seen the world's oldest shoe as well.
Yeah. The world is funny.
It's in Eugene, Oregon, for all of you Americans. Hey, Monty.
One of my favorite museums that I went to was actually the Hong Kong Museum of History. If anyone's in Hong Kong, go to the History Museum, and it's a cool museum just because they go from like dinosaurs to like milk tea. They just take you through the entire history of Hong Kong, from like just dinosaurs and like prehistoric times to boom, like modern era, like milk tea. It's a trip. It's a trip.
There's I went to the I think it's called the Museum of Science in Houston, and they had this incredible like evolution of the history of the world and life. And I would go there, and with the dinosaurs, and then when they get the human evolution part, parents would just take their kids and leave and walk around it and bypass it. Oh, it was amazing. But anyways, we're yeah.
Oh,
sorry. By the way, one more museum. Sorry, no.
One more museum. National Museum of Singapore. My favorite piece ever.
What is that?
Is this?
Ooh, I saw that when I was there.
This is a piece called Yulong Running Stream, 1988 by Ki Hong.
Running.
I went to the Museum of Singapore, and I must have missed that because I was too busy doing the Da Vinci piece, but also the modern art piece. Heads up, all y'all.
Yeah.
I love modern art. I love the ridiculous, the silly stuff they do, where it was like an infinite player tic-tac-toe game. I'm like, I'm into this.
Oh yeah.
Good art.
Oh yeah.
But I know a lot of people hate that kind of stuff, and it's fair, it's valid.
Wu Guanzhong. That's cool. I like that. Sorry, that's a cool piece.
It's my favorite art piece ever.
Yeah.
Wow. See, on It's Friday, we could be talking about this stuff.
Friday, we are talking about it.
On a different stream, I could absolutely talk about, because I'm reading all these moral philosophy books about how art like that can change your morals and ethics. But I want to talk about museums really short, because I linked this in our Discord about that one Vietnamese geological museum that is so boring. It is so bad. It has like a 1.3 on like TripAdvisor. Everyone hates it, but like the experience of being in this Vietnamese museum in Saigon is like having a Vietnamese experience where people just don't get it. But the fact that you walk in and like the shopkeep, who is like the gift shop, doesn't know the prices of the merch. I feel super seen by that. I feel like I have an uncle who absolutely is like that. He's like, I don't know how much this costs. What do I look like? I work here? And it's like, I think you do work here.
I'm pretty sure you work here.
Do you want to buy this? You don't want to buy this.
and then you schmooze and you build that rapport, and someone's like, hey, I'd like to show you some stuff, and they're like, oh, check out this ring, and you're like, oh, cool, how much is that worth? And they're like, oh, it's worth 30,000 USD, and like you can touch it if you want. You can just like play around with this. I'm like, what kind of museum is this?
I gotta say, I loved how it looked though. Like it was so old school.
It felt less like a museum and more like someone's basement of cool stuff. And that was like a very like interesting kind of thing. And all this to circle this square is just that museum experiences are like any other experiences where they're very varied, but do have their biases. And I think that's where we started this conversation. It was kind of like, yeah, you could go to a Japanese exhibit and like look at Japanese artifacts and you'll feel like you're kind of like connected with the culture. But understand that the connection you're feeling there is a manufactured piece. You are feeling the connection as is designed. And that could be a good thing. It could be positive, but it can also harbor some insidious kind of undertones that you might not be aware of by design.
Yeah. And no, a lot of museums are based on the old curiosity cabinet idea. So it's also always had this element of, look how weird these things are. Check it out. So, just keep that in mind too.
I didn't even realize it, but in my D&D game, when I play weekly, I have a culture of people who are like curiosity cabinet people, and they're all weeaboos. They're just like anime nerds, and I forgot that I just like wrote that in because how frustrated I was with museums.
Oh God, Steve.
They my one friend was playing a drow, and they came in, and all of, like the younger researchers want to show off how much drow language they knew to this drow person, and they were like, please stop. I don't want to hear your drow poetry.
That feels so real. It's like going to an extremely white part of America and have people be like, ni hao. Be like,
yep.
God.
Oh, the amount that have been ni haoed on the street. Anyways.
I'm talking about polite ni haoing, not like racist ni haoing, because there's a difference. Oh,
I haven't seen the difference yet. I hope.
I think the difference is intention.
I haven't.
It's still racist regardless. But yeah, let's continue. Sorry, I enjoyed that museum segue.
There's one more piece of this I don't want to talk about, and it talks about like festivals and things like that. And we've already kind of touched on East Asian as a pastiche, and I want to use that word very with purpose, because an East Asian festival is meaningless. That means nothing. A festival is very personal. It's very culturally relevant. And if you just Google East Asian festival, you're going to be disappointed. Or at least you should feel disappointed.
Or you should be suspicious of anything labeled as such.
Festivals are as much a part of someone's identity as like the food they eat, the way they travel, and all the other things we talked about here. So I think it's a disservice of the text. I think it's quite shameful of the text, actually, to say that you can experience Rokugani themes through an East Asian festival.
Steve, what if I went to Anime North? I'll learn all about Rokugan.
As someone who's gone to Anime North a lot, nope.
I will say though that, you know, talking about cherry blossom festivals is like, oh, this is Japan. And
you are very much welcome to attend like Canadian, Japanese, American festivals, but like, yeah, don't just search East Asian festivals.
and I want to connect it with the museum thing, because festivals are a very manufactured experience in that it's designed to have that kind of experience there. And it is not telling of the overall cultural experience of those people. It is a part of it, 100%. I would never deny that. But it is not the full story. And if you come in thinking, oh, I've invested the 3 hours to experience culture, now I'm an expert, you are doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah, now to play devil's advocate, there are going to be people who are watching this because they're not fans, and they're probably saying, well, that's a lot of work. I don't want to have to do that much work. Now, I have an answer in my head, but I'm going to ask all 5 of you, and you don't have to answer, but I'm going to pose this question. What would you say to that? If somebody said, well, that's a lot of work. I don't want to have to go and get a master's degree to do this. Or I don't want to be like Sar and have a PhD in art history in order to do this.
We're just making faces.
A lot of the people that say that are the same ones that will spend like 7 hours mapping out their fantasy world and, you know, coming up with their own lore and their own intricate and highly developed NPCs that are not as highly developed as they think. So if you can do that, you can take some time to do research into the cultures that inspired the game that you want to play.
My answer to that is Wikipedia is free.
Boom.
Yeah.
Also,
my first response to that's a lot of work is you're a lot of work.
Salty, I like
keep
it.
trying. Keep trying.
Keep trying.
Trying, sir. Sit down and keep trying.
Yeah, it's Friday. Keep trying.
Well, there's okay.
Monty, any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, oh my gosh, I'm the type of person that would spend like days researching, you know, checking out books just to write a 6,000 word short story, and it's because I'm enthusiastic and I want to learn more. So I suppose I would tell that person, then you obviously don't have any sort of like interest in learning, and so, you know, being unable to like, I don't know, I could go on and on.
I feel that like for my Denizens of Mountains and Seas zines, they were like 8 pages, and I have like a shelf full of reference books just for those 8-page zines because I put so much research into them. Like the answer is really obvious for people who say that's a lot of work. I don't want to have to do that. It's not that much work compared to what you're already doing. If you've taken the time to learn all of this about Rokugan, you can learn about actual Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And like from just like, I'm a researcher, so I really delve into random things. And like, it's only work if it's something that you aren't interested in and you don't want to put that energy into. And I think that's like the summary of what everyone's saying. If you're interested, it won't seem like work.
Exactly.
If you just want to like semi-play your white view version of a samurai, it's going to seem like a lot of work. So think about it.
I'll actually take a different... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like a lot of times like if you're playing L5R, if you're GMing L5R, a lot half the time you're already spending like time on the L5R wiki, like researching like stuff anyway. So why wouldn't you just go to the actual Wikipedia to research, make sure what you're researching is actually historically and culturally accurate.
I would say that some of the coolest lore is just lore about the real world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I was gonna add on that I actually take a different lens on it, where it's like someone's like, I don't want to do that much work, and I'm like, good. I also don't want to do work. I'm just as lazy as you are, but we then need to like be iterative on it. So rather than play L5R and try to like expand the scope of your world to all of East Asia, maybe in your D&D game, pick one cultural signifier and give it to a very small set of people, and just practice being good and understanding and feeling what that cultural signifier means to those people, and just start there. And when you're ready, put in a second cultural signifier, or give another like fantasy race of people, fantasy culture of people, group of people, two cultural signifiers, and just play with that.
Mm-hmm.
And don't stream it. Please don't stream it. But also with your group of friends that you trust and you love, play with that. And that, I think, is where you'll grow as a professional and as a person.
But also ask questions. Stay curious. If you don't want to do the research, just ask questions. Like, literally, Agatha and I know a lot about like the cultural aspects of our Dungeons and Asians game. But like Steve, you and Amar don't have those experiences. And so what do? You ask questions. Like, none of you are going out and doing homework on this. Like, just ask questions. And that gets the conversation started, right? But anyways, let's keep moving. We got 20 minutes left. Is there anything else in this one paragraph here that we want to talk about? No?
Only that you will be surprised if you do the research of how many real life events center around cultural signifiers and Asians. You will be surprised if you research it, if you Google it. You absolutely will be, and it will be a magical experience. I guarantee it.
Okay, so here's what we'll do then.
Surprise, Asians!
Surprise, Asian stuff. Okay,
Who are these Asians? What are they doing? Oh, they're just making history.
So I want to ask all of you then, is there one particular aspect of Asian history or culture that you think should go into an RPG? And that's a tough question. And how about I mean, I could start. I'm just going to get the information. So I'm going to start with something that I think should 100% go into an RPG, and it was actually going to go into an RPG, but the project didn't end up happening. So in Canadian history, we recently learned about something called Operation Oblivion. Now, Operation Oblivion was a World War II initiative where 13 Chinese-Canadian men were selected for this secret project where they trained with the S2E, which are basically the what turned into MI6. They were trained on spycraft and guerrilla warfare, and they were actually go to the Pacific Front and train resistance fighters. So 13 of these men were trained to train rebels. And this story was actually unknown until about like 5 years ago, when one of the original Operation Oblivion members revealed all these photos that he had secretly taken of their training. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to operationoblivion.com. And it has a history of all of the different Chinese Canadians who fought in World War II. So that's something that I think would be super cool to use in a TTRPG. Or even if you use this in a fantasy RPG and you had 13 people who were, taken for this secret project. Just the story of it. 13 people who didn't have as many rights. A group of people who belong to a visible minority in your fantasy world, and they did some great good, and they were told not to talk about it. And what happens when the players find out? I think that's really fascinating. Or even if you're playing as these characters, put that in your Blades in the Dark game. Do any of you have anything that you think would be really neat to include in a TTRPG story?
I think I think the resistance of the Southeast Asian nations in World War II do not get enough credit.
Mm-hmm.
That's I think that would be a very good, because it wasn't just like Singapore mounted its own resistance, Malaysia mounted its own resistance, Indonesia mounted its own resistance. No, it was Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Siam at the time coordinating their resistance.
Mm-hmm.
So it's something that doesn't get talked about. I know the most Western powers, when you talk about East Asia during World War II, most the Western powers gets most of the credit. So I think that there's a lot to say about the resistance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. There are tons of stories that can be told, and you could just go on Wikipedia and go on the internet and learn about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what we're trying to make. Do any of you have anything that you want to share, like a cool tidbit for the chat?
Sorry, no, Monty, please go.
Monty.
Oh, okay. No, I've been. This is the research I was talking about. I've been reading about the Transcontinental Railroad, and there's this funerary practice that I've been trying to get more information on, where I think they're called bone collectors, where they would basically dig up the bones of the Chinese laborers and then bring them back to China for burial. There's actually, I think, a Canadian documentary that I can't seem to access about that, the practice in Canada during the same time. And I think there's even a family, I don't want to call it business because that's kind of weird, but like in Taiwan, that does this kind of cleaning of the bones in a practice that's been around for hundreds of years. So I don't actually know the actual like Chinese name for it, and my research skills aren't great, so like I'm still hunting around for more information about that. But
if you want institutional access, just hit me up with search terms or even that documentary you're trying to get a hold of.
And I feel like this would be the perfect opportunity to segue into a VPN sponsor, but we don't have one.
You got me surprised there for a second. I'm like, yo, we're gonna shout out NordVPN.
You know what? It's actually I feel a little ExpressVPN reached out to us. No joke. And I was like, I don't know if it fits with our brand. Would have been the perfect opportunity. Dang it.
Oh.
We should think about Toronto. They have a VPN service called Bear Tunnel. And it's a VPN service. It is what it is. But Bear Tunnel has great art, where it's just a bear tunneling for every single piece of updates they do. And I like their stuff just for the art. I love seeing a bear go through a Mario pipe. I love seeing a bear have an X-ray because they're talking about transparency. Like, it's a bear.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
It is cute. Yeah.
I was gonna. I don't know if Steve, you were gonna say something.
I have one thought that's percolating, but Jeremy, if you got something, go for it.
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna shout out. I talked about this on the Asians Recommend stream. Just all of the Taiwanese indigenous people who had their own beliefs and cultures and were colonized by the Japanese. And then there's this whole period where they fought against the Japanese, and many of them had to reconcile their identities and were forced into the Japanese army during World War II. There's a lot of interesting stories to be told there. I mean, I wrote a whole thesis on it. So a lot of interesting questions about identity, interesting questions about fighting against colonialism, all types of things that are great inspiration for deep, evocative tabletop RPG stories. And also in general, like, I think, a nice thing to think about is, what does like Asian inspired fantasy look like to you? This book presents it from this samurai Japanese perspective, but there's so many other types of Asian fantasy, like wuxia is an example. But what about other cultures? What about like Vietnam, Southeast Asia, other cultures of Southeast Asia, Thailand? I keep thinking back to this one artist on Twitter, and it's been shared in our Discord before. 1 Megawatt, when he's putting out these illustrations for a Vietnamese folklore fantasy project, and it's so good. Like, the single illustration that he put out is just so beautiful and evocative and different from what your standard idea of typically advertised Asian fantasy is. Like, more of that.
Yeah. That's
on that idea of kind of like open the door, like allow things to kind of flow in. I'm gonna highlight, for a tabletop RPG, more food, because we don't talk about food on the stream enough, I don't think.
I mean, we're talking about it tomorrow when we do Dungeons and Asians.
Yeah, we will. But I want to talk about episode 4, season 1, Ugly Delicious. And what I'm talking about here is when it comes to Vietnamese representation, I think a lot of Vietnamese people would resonate with the terms of resiliency and agility. Vietnam, if you're not aware, has gone through a lot of turmoil in the last 100 years. And that is enough time that individual people can experience a lot of different tension around their political climate. And that has created a generation of people who are very unique. Episode 4, season 1 of Ugly Delicious with Dagman Chang, where he talks about how Vietnamese pho had made its way to South US, and how people in the South US who also have their own difficulties and their own tensions and pressures took pho and they combined it with their own ingredients, things they had available like crawfish, and they combined it with Vietnamese ingredients, which they would import because they loved the flavors so much. But here's the twist. Vietnamese people in North Vietnam were like, I love this. And they brought it back so they could take a Vietnamese spin on a Southern spin of Vietnamese cuisine. And the idea of that cross-cultural boundary is magical. It is truly something that is special. And if there's a tabletop RPG talking about how these things intersect and how the wonderful magical things happen, and we just talked about food and things we made, even if it's fantastical dishes, I think people will get a lot of value out of that.
Okay, so here's a hack for you then. No, here's a hack. And hey, you know what? We'll play this one too. It's a microscope hack. But instead of the history of a world, it's the history of a dish and how it changes through time and how conflicts change this dish.
I fucking love that.
Boom! We're going to call it microwave.
Oh, I'm out. End the stream.
Yeah. Ow! Daniel, high five.
No, cut it. We're done.
Just like, nope.
Cut it.
But yeah, there's
but I
100%
think we should do that. I'm going to write this down. I'm going to put this in the Daniel Kwan Idea Vault.
There's actually a cool amount of research and archaeological research on Chinatowns across North America and encampments where you see Chinese Americans and Canadians trying to continue food traditions and culinary practices with the ingredients that they have access to. And I just read one recently on how they exchanged with local native populations because the white populations were kind of intolerant and intolerable. So they formed these really interesting interactions and food traditions that blend local indigenous and East Asian, mostly Chinese. So like it's cool.
That's an L5R campaign I would like to play. You can take inspiration from that. How did the unicorn, like, did they continue to cook Rokugani cuisine while they were like away for like 500 years or whatever? Like, what are their traditions?
Yeah.
You know,
what can you maintain? What can you change?
What do they maintain? You know, you can take inspiration from a lot of Asian people living overseas, or even like, look at the Hmong people, don't have a country of their own, have traveled all around the world. Look at Hmong communities in like North America, like Minnesota and stuff like that, who've really developed and created their own ways of maintaining culture. Like, you can get a lot of inspiration to create a very interesting version of the Unicorn Clan just from researching that kind of stuff. It wouldn't be real Rokugan, I guess, but it would be cool.
No, but the book says that you could change Rokugan to be whatever you want.
Yeah.
So it's honestly, your real Rokugan.
I wouldn't say that that would be real or not real Rokugan. I'd say it's fleshed out Rokugan.
It'd be interesting, yeah.
Yeah. One more piece of this, because this came up in our Discord actually, because our Discord is not just solely Asians. Invites are closed, unfortunately, because we need more moderators to make sure that it remains a safe space. But we did. Sorry, Daniel. I'm gonna keep going.
No, go.
One person did reach out to me and was like, Steve, you talk about food so often and food and culture identity, but as a white person, I apologize if this was inappropriate, but I'm calling out this discussion we had. I don't feel connected to food whatsoever. And I actually think that's so fascinating, because I bet there's a ton of people, even viewers out there, who don't understand or don't feel the same connection to food that maybe I do. And
I don't feel as connected to food as a lot of other I don't know if it's a half Asian thing or whatever, but I think it's a personal thing. I actually don't feel as connected to food for probably a lot of reasons.
And I think that's so fascinating.
I love food, but I don't. Yeah, like the way you describe it is very unique.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like my own kind of upbringing as a child and whatnot. But I also think there's a lot of people out there who feel similarly, Sarah and Jeremy, to you, where you're like, food doesn't mean that much to me, but you have to eat it. Like you have to connect with it in some way. And even the idea that you don't connect with it is a kind of connection, not to food, but to other people.
Yeah.
And to me, that is very fascinating. And that's a conversation that we can't have on stream today, but I do wish to extend. So I want to thank our Discord for all of like the thoughts and nuances they bring from their own experiences, because it's wonderful. It's truly wonderful.
Sorry, I'm just typing.
I'm all about food.
I'm all about food personally.
Oh, me too.
It's a big part of my academic.
Yeah, I'm
both
all
of our
about
academic
food,
works.
but I feel like I don't have the kind of deep kind of family connections that a lot of people have for probably personal reasons. I think certain memories, like I look at my girlfriend who like grew up with very defined family meals, and that's a huge part of her identity, and learning how to cook kind of these recipes passed down from grandmother to mother to her. And really bonding over food. And for various reasons growing up, I did not have that. And I kind of wish I did sometimes, but I also am fascinated with analyzing why I don't have that exact connection, as you said, Steve, and like analyzing there's a story to be told there. It's a different story, but it's an interesting one nonetheless.
Well, here's the thing though, it's never too late to develop a connection to food.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But it'll be different. It's always a different kind of connection.
Like for me, my connection to food is relatively recent. I used to hate Chinese food. I used to hate Chinese food, and when I went to Jordan for the first time to do archaeological work, I experienced that cuisine for the first time there. And when I came home, my parents were like, "Yo, what do you want to eat?" I was like, "Barbecue pork on rice."
Yeah.
That's a good point, Daniel. I think my connection with food is definitely more recent and probably solidified when I was overseas, like living in Taiwan and Hong Kong. It's not like a childhood. I guess that's why it doesn't feel deep rooted for me, because it's not like a childhood thing. But maybe it's just as legitimate. I just need to think of it, reframe my thinking.
It doesn't have to be a childhood thing. It's not like everyone has that moment, like at the end of Ratatouille, where he eats the ratatouille, he goes, and he gets taken back to his childhood.
Yeah.
It's not that. It's like food helps you learn more about a culture. Food is literally the lens into a culture. Like Steve said, food is reflective of the socio-political history of a region. Right? I don't say country, right? I say a region, right?
Yeah.
Like food is reflective of the relationship that we have with one another. It's reflective of how we, talk to certain people. Food is so important.
Yeah, and so when I say I'm all about food, I also have a complicated history with food and my family and what it means to me, but I am a researcher of food. I try to reconstruct meals and the concept of food and the edible and the social side of food, even though I'm using like residues and artifacts, but I'm trying to see the past as people instead of objects. And one way to do that is to consider the concept of food and consumption and commensality. So how people eat together.
Yeah.
And make food together. And, now I'm all about food. Like I read this is what I think about a lot.
Interesting.
I mean, if you just look at Italian cuisine, really, if you think about that, the history of evolution of Italian cuisine, that's like the perfect example of how different regions and how different different outside influences can affect cuisine. Because if you look now, Roman cuisines, you get a lot of, it's more of a working man's food, whereas you go to Naples, Naples, well, obviously pizza, but if you go to northern Italy, it's a little bit more, the cuisine's a little bit more refined, a little bit more heartier.
I'm fascinated by the quote unquote working man's cuisines of the world.
So, on the note of Italian food, I'm going to bring out one of my favorite books of all time.
Oh, wow.
Ooh, this has turned into an Asian's recommend, by the way.
Well, it's not an Asian book. It's not an Asian book. This book is called Pizza: A Global History.
Oh, I bought my girlfriend a bunch of those. It's a series.
It's called the Edible series.
Yeah, I bought her tea, pudding, and cake. Global History. Yeah.
So this is it's a history of pizza, starting from its roots in Italy and how when during the Columbian Exchange the Italians received the nightshade plants like the tomato and they thought it was decorative and ornamental, and then somebody was like, "I'm gonna eat this thing." And everybody thought it was poisonous. And then from the first pizzas to how pizza traveled to America and how pizza went from an Italian-American home-cooked meal to something massive like Pizza Hut. And Pizza Hut is super important to the spread of pizza around the planet. But if you want to learn more about the intersection of like culture, history, the diaspora of people, Pizza: A Global History is a fantastic
that
example.
series is great. It's just like lore about food.
It's awesome. It's accessible too. I think they've got
there's quite a lot in that series.
There's
the amount of
apple,
time
barbecue, beer, brandy, caviar, cheese, chocolate, cocktails, curry, donut, edible flowers, eggs, figs, gin, herbs, hot dog, lemon, melon, mushroom, olive, oranges, pasta, noodles, pineapple, pomegranate, potato, rum, sandwich. Seaweed soup, sweets and candy, truffle, and whiskey.
Think about banh mi's from Vietnamese culture. Sandwiches are like super important.
Oh, there's even more. There's banana, beef, berries, bread, cake, champagne, chilies, corn, dates, dumplings for all us Asians, and there's one called fats, and moonshine is one of them too.
Oh, those are books, not
they're
pizza
books.
toppings.
Yeah.
Oh no, these are pizza.
I thought you were watching pizza toppings.
I like drizzle some moonshine on my pizza.
Moonshine pizza.
like sandwich.
The prohibition pizza.
Sandwich on the other half.
Would you call that moonshine pie?
Sorry. Okay, excuse me, Mad Wahlberg. Pizza quesadilla. It's a pizzadilla.
Okay.
End the stream.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about the book anymore. So
that makes sense. Speaking of which, I do have 2 pizzas downstairs that I would like to eat right now.
Oof.
So it's 9:00. Yeah, honestly, I had a lot of fun. We talked about some really serious shit on this episode, but I think we talked about like some good things that L5R is doing and some things that the audience can do to try to make their games better. Do any of you folks have anything to share? While we close.
I would like to promote my blog, pixelgrotto.tumblr.com. I think Daniel can drop the link, or one of you guys can drop the link in the Twitch chat. But I was just it's my blog that I update whenever I have time. But I wrote a recently fairly lengthy post about my experience finishing up a D&D campaign where we played through Out of the Abyss, which is one of the 5th edition modules, for almost 2 years, and it was an interesting experience because it was something we don't really talk about too much. We often talk about a really bad tabletop role-playing experience or a really good tabletop role-playing experience, but we don't often talk about the just okay experience. And there's a lot of just okay experiences out there where for whatever reason you don't necessarily connect with the material, or you don't really like the character that you're playing as that much, or maybe you don't vibe with the group that much, but you still decide to stick with it because maybe the highs are just high enough to outweigh the lows. And that was what it was kind of like for me. It was an interesting experience playing this particular game with a group that I started out with when I first moved back to the States, and then kind of outgrew over time, and then I kind of didn't quite connect with the adventure as a whole because it was not my ideal sort of D&D adventure. But I wrote about it, and I think it's kind of like this hobby has a lot of really high highs and like really low bad points, but there's also that middle ground where, not every campaign is going to be like a 5 out of 5 or a 1 out of 5. You might get a 3 out of 5 campaign, and that's still okay.
Yeah. My D&D group's going through something like that too. We just had a breakup in the group.
Yeah, it can happen. It's interesting. It's like I actually wrote about it in our Discord. I was venting about it in our Discord channel at one point. I was like, do I stay in this group or not? Because we were just going through like a slog, and I didn't know if I'd really wanted to stay. But we were about to hit like level 15, and I was like, I might as well like stick around. We're very close to the end. And it was kind of like, I went through a lot of ups and downs. Like, what are the things that I enjoy about this experience? What interactions have really stuck out to me? And is that worth continuing beyond a certain point? And the eventual choice that I made was, we beat the module, and some of the other folks were going on to like higher level homebrew content, which is not really my thing. And then I gently bowed out. But it was kind of a long process to come to that. And I did feel a certain sadness afterwards, because I had left like a long running group, and some people never find a long running group.
Well, you grieve for those social connections.
Yeah, you grieve for certain social interactions, but also sometimes it's okay to do that. Like, it's okay to leave your long-running group if it's not really vibing with you in the right way. And we should normalize talking about that. I feel.
Like, what was I?
Agreed.
It was Steve and I on the D&D stream we were on. We talked about before the stream. We talked about Friends, and I said what we were talking about Mahar's game, Falling. Mahar.itch.io. We were talking about Falling, and one of the questions was about losing friends and how you lose friends or something like that. And Steve asked me that question, and I said, well, there's no reason. Sometimes you're just not friends with someone. Sometimes you just move on. Sometimes you stop talking to a person for a little bit, and then you start talking to them again, right? It happens. And it doesn't make your friendship bad. It doesn't make your friendship, I mean, it could be, but that doesn't necessarily have to be the reason. Sometimes you're just in somebody's life a lot at one point. Sometimes you're not in their life a lot.
Yeah. Well, Daniel, you and I have known each other for almost 10 years, but how many of those years have we been in consistent contact?
Yeah, I would say like we talked a lot for the first like a lot for the first like, I don't know, 5 years of our friendship, and then on and off, and then now we talk like all the time, again. So it's like, you know, you and I, our friendship has like communication wise has been like this, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, like, you and I hadn't talked in a while, and then when we started doing this, it's just like nothing changed. Like, we have changed as individuals, but the respect we have for one another hasn't changed. And that's it, right? And the same thing goes for groups. If you outgrow a group, and who knows, maybe you'll come back to that group.
Maybe you'll come back. And that's a thing that throughout my life, I've kind of had to deal with this interesting feeling of feeling guilty when I'm not close enough with a friend. And this is probably wrapped up in my own personal trauma, but whenever like a friendship would fall away, my natural response was to feel like it was my fault. Mm-hmm. And in terms of this group, because role-playing games are an extremely social activity, when I wasn't quite feeling this group, I felt like it was my fault and I needed to work to fix that. And it wasn't entirely my fault. It was just something that happened. And, you know, I still think about it, and it's one of those things that, you know, like you said, Daniel, sometimes friendships gently break apart to come back together later. And like, it's something I think, it's something I'm interested in talking about. Like, yeah.
Let's talk about that on It's Friday. No, we're going to figure out a new title. Maybe next stream we'll do another poll, and
we'll keep trying.
We'll keep trying. We'll have Keep Trying and It's Friday, and then we'll just add a couple more. So if you have any suggestions for our new show, hit us up. You can, if you're a member of our Discord, re-roll. That's a good one too. That's a good one too. I'm honestly really sad that the wrap up wasn't voted as high.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Because that's the one I really liked. But anyways, if you want to be involved, if you want to be involved in these conversations, if you have any ideas for our new show where we could talk about food, where we could talk about friendships, relationships, Asianness, where I could talk about my love for Jay Park, we need a place for this, and we need a name. Right now, it's between Keep Trying and It's Friday. Probably It's Friday with Asians Represent. I don't know yet. But if you have any ideas, hit us up on social media at AZNSRepresent. If you're watching on YouTube, you can leave a comment on the YouTube video. Make sure you subscribe, hit that bell icon to be notified when a new video pops up. Dang that algorithm. all of the socials for everybody is on the screen. If you're not following Steve, Monty, Jeremy, Sar, and Emma, I don't know what you're doing. You're missing out on some quality content. Steve, best-selling author, UnbreakableRPG.com. Jeremy, journalist, Asian Clark Kent, pixelgrotto.tumblr.com. Sar, L5R, Grandmaster, CCG, Extraordinaire. Follow Sar, ask Sar questions. Maybe one day when there's a competitive scene, you'll probably see Sar there as a judge. Monty, the mystery, constantly working on things, contributed at L5R, but also working on projects that he can't talk about yet, but one day will on a future show that we do, maybe not called It's Friday or Frya, like Frya. No, I didn't do that. But yeah, follow these people. They're amazing. I enjoy talking to all of you every Friday. And when L5R is over, I hope that doesn't end. And if it does end, I'm sure we'll come back to chatting on Fridays.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That being said, take care, folks. Take care of yourselves. I'm going to go eat pizza. Baby Yoda and I are going to probably watch The Mandalorian and eat pizza. Goodbye.
You have a beautiful child, Daniel.
Healthy baby.
Healthy baby.